July 10th, 1944, Normandy, France. 3 weeks after D-Day. The sun had just begun to bleed over the shattered horizon when Private First Class Thomas Hale knelt in the mud of a ruined orchard in the Bocage country, listening. Not looking, listening. The distant thunder of artillery rolled across the fields like an angry god. The air stank of smoke, iron, and something else. That faint, metallic whisper of danger that soldiers learned to recognize without words. Ahead of him lay an open field, maybe 200 yards wide, with nothing but churned earth and broken fences between the hedgerows. But Hale knew what hid beneath it. Teller mines, smines, hundreds of them. The kind that didn't just rip a leg away. The bouncing Bettys took whole men, left no warning, no trace. His 29th Infantry Division team had lost 2 combat engineers the week before trying to clear a similar patch near St. Lay during the Battle of St. Lay. There were no Polish mine detectors here. The equipment had been destroyed in an ambush. The rest was scattered miles back, waiting for the front to move toward Operation Cobra. Yet command needed this field cleared today. So here he was, alone, crouched low in the Norman bocage, feeling the morning fog curl against his face, his hands covered in wet soil. Around him, the world seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds had gone silent. He reached into a breast pocket and pulled out a single dented can, empty. He held it close to the ground, listening as he lightly tapped its side with a small stone. Tap, pause, tap. At first, it seemed meaningless, just sound bouncing against the silence. But Hale tilted his head, his ears tuned from months in the field. He noticed the way the echo came back, dull, uneven, not from the surface, but from below. He tapped again. The echo changed pitch, barely perceptible, but there, behind him, Sergeant Peter Kowalski muttered through clenched teeth. "You lost your bloody mind, Hale?" "If I am," Hale said quietly, "it's the only thing keeping us alive." He moved another few feet and tapped again. This time the sound reverberated differently, sharper, thinner. Hollow beneath the mud where a teller mine waited. He marked it with a stick, then backed away slowly. That was how it began. In the stillness of one July morning during the Battle of Normandy, a 22-year-old infantryman discovered a way to detect mines using echoes alone. No Polish detectors, no tools, no maps, just sound and the absolute focus of a man standing between life and death. The other soldiers watched in disbelief as he worked. Every few feet he would kneel, listen, tap the ground, and move on. Hours passed. The enemy artillery never came close enough to interrupt the strange ritual taking place in the fog. Bit by bit, Hale marked a safe path through the bocage, one echo at a time. When he finally stood, mud dripping from his uniform, the field behind him looked like a chessboard of white cloth markers. 500 yards, cleared by hand. And the only sound left was the faint ringing in his ears, the echo of life itself. But what none of them knew, not then, was that this strange instinct of his would soon face a far greater test. The next field would not be empty. This one would fight back. The next morning came without warning. A sky swollen gray, thunder growling somewhere beyond Caen. Rain had turned the earth into black syrup, hiding everything beneath a slick, deceitful sheen. Hale's unit from the 29th Infantry Division had orders. Push through Hill 192 before midnight, preparing for the eventual Operation Cobra breakout. That meant crossing another minefield in the hedgerow country. Only this time, it wasn't abandoned. The Germans were still here. Hale crouched beside a crater, boots sinking into the muck, clutching the same dented can from yesterday. Around him, the platoon waited, 20 men, jittery, smoking, pretending not to notice how quiet it was, except for distant bursts of machine gun fire. Lieutenant Samuel Rains leaned in. "You really think you can do it again, Hale?" Hale looked up, eyes hollow from no sleep. "I can try. If I don't, we don't move." Rains rubbed a hand over his stubble. "You do your part. I'll keep the Krauts busy." Hal nodded once, placed the can against the ground, and gave it a soft tap. The sound came back oddly, faint at first, then fractured, as if the earth itself were breaking up beneath him. The rain didn't help. It blurred everything, made echoes slippery and dishonest. Still, Hale kept at it. Tap, pause, listen. You could almost feel the rhythm in his breathing. Steady, patient, alive. Every second stretched into eternity. The men behind him didn't dare speak. Halfway through the field, something changed. The echo didn't come back at all. It died swallowed whole. That silence meant only one thing. He froze. Not a breath escaped. Slowly, he pulled a dull knife from his belt and began scraping a thin layer of mud away. He expected to see the familiar metal cap of a teller mine instead of wires. Fresh ones. "Tripwires," he whispered. "They've mixed S-mines in now." The Germans had learned. They were listening too. He held up a hand, signaling halt. The platoon behind him barely exhaled. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a sniper cracked a single shot. It tore through a patch of wet leaves inches from his shoulder. The men flinched, but Hale stayed still, counting in his head, hearing how the echo bounced off the far hedgerow. Even gunfire, he'd learned, spoke its own truth. He marked the wire with a twig, lifted it gently, and used its trembling sound to detect where it ended. It took him the better part of an hour to trace one path forward through the bocage. His hands were numb. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of raindrops. Behind him, a medic whispered, "He's got a death wish." Kowalski hissed back, "No, he's got ears blessed by the devil." When they finally reached the other side, soaked and shaking, Hale collapsed against a tree. His hearing had turned strange. Every sound throbbed, every vibration felt alive. It was as though the earth itself had spoken through frequencies, only he could hear. Rains crouched beside him. "We'll name it after you," he said. Echoes rode. Hale didn't answer. He just stared at his hands, palms trembling. Because under the ringing in his ears, he could still hear something else. Something faint, another field. Waiting. Night fell without stars. Only lightning flashed over the ruins, scattering silver across puddles and broken helmets. The platoon set up a temporary line near a farmhouse that had half burned to the ground. Inside, Thomas Hall sat by a broken window, rubbing his ears as though he could press the silence out of them. It was never quiet anymore. Even when the guns slept, the ground spoke in tremors. He could hear footsteps through the mud before they came. He could tell the weight of a man by the way the sound bent around his armor. The war had changed his hearing into something alien, neither gift nor curse, but something in between. He wasn't sleeping, not really. He just stared at the field beyond the farmhouse. The next obstacle. Intelligence said it was mined twice over, with both teller mines and bouncing meddies. And yet the order stood. Advance before dawn. Clearing 5 fields was already impossible. Doing it with no Polish mine detectors was madness. But Hale had stopped thinking about impossible. He just listened. A distant boom shuddered through the floorboards, and dust fell from the rafters like ash. One of the younger soldiers flinched. Hale didn't. He tilted his head, eyes closing. That wasn't shelling. That was below. Kowalski frowned. Below what? The ground, Hale said. They've rigged pressure bombs deeper in clay, probably 2 inches under the frost line. He rapped his knuckles on the floor, letting the echo ripple through the soil. They sound thinner now. There's air trapped. If I can hear that air, I can map it. Map it? Not with paper, he said quietly. With sound. He stepped out into the rain again. Alone. Rifle slung but useless. Tin can still at his side like an old friend. The moon broke through just enough to silver the mist, and in that light, he started again. Tap, listen, breathe. You'd think the world would sound like chaos in a battlefield. But to Hale, it was a pattern, a pulse. Each mine echo had its own timbre, slightly duller than clean ground, as if the earth itself tried to hide what man had buried inside it. One by one, he marked the silent patches. Sometimes the echo came back clear, meaning safety. Sometimes it didn't come back at all, meaning death. The sound taught him more about war than words ever could, that even soil remembers suffering. Hours passed. The soldiers waited at the edge, not daring to interrupt. Then Hale paused. He'd reached a stretch of land where no echo returned, but this time it wasn't silence. It was a hum. Barely there, like a vibration under his boots. He pressed an ear against the earth. Beneath it, he could hear faint movement, not mechanical, not explosive. Rhythmic, human. His blood went cold. "They're tunneling," he whispered. Below us, Rains cursed under his breath. "Saboteurs?" Hale nodded. "They've mined from beneath. They're building charges to detonate the whole ridge when we cross." The decision hit like thunder. If the Germans finished before dawn, the path he'd spent days clearing would become their grave. Everyone turned to him. The same man who could hear death before it spoke. Hale looked out at the fog-veiled horizon, heart-pounding, and said the only thing left to say. "Then we go now." And into the wet silence, 20 men rose from cover and followed the one soldier who could read echoes like scripture. But before the night would end, not all of them would return. They moved at first light, pale dawn breaking through rain clouds, lighting their faces in cold silver. Every breath steamed in the chill. As the squad advanced across terrain they had no right to survive. The field was slick and noiseless, save for that faint rhythm of Hale's tapping can, guiding them like a metronome through death. The world felt impossibly still. Even nature listened. Through the mist, Hale could see the far side of the field, a stretch of safety barely 50 yards away. The others held their rifles high, stepping only where his marks lay. The pattern was tight, precise, and yet, with each tap, the echoes came slower, fainter. He stopped. Beneath his boot, something deep shifted, a vibration he hadn't felt before. Not the high-pitched breath of a mine, something bigger. A heartbeat beneath the stone. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to the mud. A faint rumble rose, not explosive yet, but close. Hale's brain caught what his body already knew. The tunnel detonators were armed. The Germans had predicted the crossing. He staggered up, shouting over the wind, "Run! Move!" They've lit the charge. Chaos erupted instantly. Men broke formation, sprinting for cover as the ground began to tremble. One by one, the echoes turned violent, the air splitting with concussion. Dirt and steel erupted behind them like the mouth of the earth opening wide. Hale kept tapping even as he ran, counting the reflections to track the ripples of fire spreading beneath his feet. Each echo gave him seconds, a sound map of destruction, invisible but alive in his head. He guided Kowalski left, Rains right. He dove through mud, shouting coarse corrections like a mad orchestra conductor. And then, silence again. Too sudden, too complete. He glanced back. The rear half of the field was gone, swallowed. Smoke rose in slow spirals. No shapes moved within it. Only 6 of them reached the far ridge. The last explosion came distant, muffled by the rain. But Hale didn't turn to watch. He just crouched, hands shaking from exhaustion, the dented can still miraculously intact beside him. 5 fields, Rains said, catching his breath, voice flat with disbelief. 5, without a single Polish detector. Hale looked out at the torn ground, at the way the echoes faded into nothing now. "They were never silent," he murmured. "We just never listened right." In the distance, The artillery began again, dull thunder rolling through soaked valleys. The squad pushed forward, vanishing into smoke and dawn. No medals were written in his name. No official record tells how the Fifth Field fell silent that day during the Battle of Normandy. But some of the soldiers who survived swore that, in quiet moments between shellfire, they could still hear the rhythm of that tap, the sound of one man who refused to trust anything except the whispers beneath his boots. In war, heroes are not always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who hear what no one else can.